Hello, and welcome to the Reading Room, the podcast brought to you by your Rowan County Public Library. I'm Morgan.
And I'm Emery.
And Megan could not be with us this time. She begged off to do other stuff. Gosh, gross.
Nefarious deeds.
Probably. But that's okay. We're going to go on without her this time because this was bound to happen eventually. We're so busy here. So, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about some items from our catalog today. Do the expected book review section. That's something we haven't actually really done yet. We've done Bad Book Club, we've done Pleasant Surprises, but we haven't just sat down and said, okay, here's something that we have been reading like for our own entertainment that we deliberately chose for our pleasure.
Right. Here's what we've been reading. Here's how we feel about it. Here's whether you should read it or not. So
exactly. And I generally only read one book at a time, but when I am reading, I go through them pretty quick. But I know that you tend to read 4 or 5 books like simultaneously, so you might actually go through them faster than me.
I think that I've got 3 physically checked out. Well, actually, one of these is not checked out to me, but we'll get to that later. And then 3 checked out on Overdrive right now.
Yeah, it's a predicament when we have that 20 item limit on your card, but then you also have separate limits for Overdrive and Hoopla and our other digital services, and so it piles up. If you're a reader, it gets out of control very quickly.
It certainly does. This is why I can never finish a book, because I typically read chapter by chapter. So like I'll read a chapter of one, put it down, switch to another, and it feels like I'm reading the same things for years, but it's just because I'm reading 15 books at a time. If you're coming to librarians for structured reading, don't. Is what we're saying here.
Don't do that. There are other librarians at other libraries on other podcasts who will pretend otherwise. But we are just here to keep it 100, and we're going to tell you right now that that's not how it is behind the scenes.
It's not.
So, well, you actually have some books physically with you that
I
you've
do.
been reading.
I'm not sure why I felt the need to physically remove them from my bag and sit them on the table next to me as we record this.
They're part of the podcast
motivation,
too.
Yeah. They can't speak to you. They're speaking through me right now. Okay. Well, yeah. So I've got 2 physically next to me, and I did say that I have 3 checked out. I do have 3 checked out, but one of them I haven't started yet. Well, no. I said 3 are checked out. 1 is not checked out. We'll get to that in a minute. But
I love the building suspense that there's a story here.
Well, there is a story here. So I have one in my bag still that I didn't get out. It didn't grace the table with its presence because I haven't actually started it yet. So I didn't feel like I do it justice. But I do have 2 next to me. And we'll get to not the elephant in the room first, the one that is actually, in fact, checked out to me, which is called The Lost Apothecary. And it is an adult fiction novel written by Sarah Penner. And I actually think that Atlanta recommended this one to me or was reading it, and I was immediately hooked, immediately interested. So
yeah, the title grabbed me.
Yeah, same. And I wish that the listeners here could see the cover because it is beautiful.
Yeah, that's a good statement on like the effectiveness of good cover art because I love the jacket on that.
Sure, absolutely. That's another thing. As librarians, we will tell you the old adage, don't judge a book by its cover. Trash.
Yeah.
We all will, and we always will.
Yeah, when you pull something out and look at it, we are monkeys first.
For sure.
If it's ugly, we will put it back on the shelf.
If it's a boring cover, ugly cover, disinterest immediately.
Yeah, because this is 2021. We've moved on from everything is leather bound.
Yeah.
So like now that it's part of what gets you to read a book, part of what grabs you is the marketing.
For sure. So The Lost Apothecary, in the fewest words that I can describe it in, is a book about a woman who runs an apothecary, which on the surface is just that. It's just an apothecary shop. But if you dig a little deeper into it, it is a place where women can come from all over to buy tinctures to poison the oppressive men in their lives with.
Okay, now I'm really interested.
Right? That's exactly how I felt. I read the inside cover and I was like, I have to.
Oh yes, I need a little something for this headache. Wink, wink.
Exactly.
It's like, oh, I have something for your headache.
This capital H headache.
Yeah.
Ooh. Yeah. So I'm not very far into it yet, but it is already so interesting, so captivating. I don't know How the story is going to progress, I don't know how it ends, but as of this moment, I would say that I very much recommend it.
Well, I definitely am interested. Like you've already grabbed me because I want to know first of all, like the Lost Apothecary. Why is it
So,
lost?
okay. So we can actually get into the why is it lost just from the little inside cover description here.
Mm-hmm.
So if I have not caught your attention with this yet, I'll read you the description on the inside cover and then you can decide for yourself if you're interested and if you want to read this book. So first we have this tiny short little preface and it just says a forgotten story, a secret network of women, a legacy of poison and revenge. Welcome to the Lost Apothecary.
Mm.
So our actual descriptor is hidden in the depths of 18th century London, a secret apothecary shop caters to an unusual kind of clientele. Women across the city whisper of a mysterious figure named Nella who sells well disguised poisons to use against the oppressive men in their lives. Nella's dark world is no place for her newest patron, a precocious 12-year-old girl named Eliza Fanning. But their unexpected bond sparks a string of consequences that echoes through the centuries. 200 years later, aspiring historian Caroline Parsifal discovers an aged apothecary vial in the River Thames. As she is newly grappling with the searing betrayal of her husband's infidelity, a curious research project is exactly the distraction Caroline needs. But when she discovers a link between the vial and London's long unsolved apothecary murders, Caroline's upended present soon collides with an explosive history, binding her fate to Nella's and Eliza's in a stunning twist that transcends the barrier of time.
Okay, I was not expecting that.
Right? I
I
know.
was like, I thought that the whole thing would be taking place in that initial 1700s period.
No,
So,
no.
okay, so there's a little back and forth where like the book is gonna have some setup, like flashbacks to the past, and then jump back
Yes,
to her in the present.
exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
So the Lost Apothecary speaks to the fact that the majority of this book is set 200 years after Nella's story.
Okay, so it's been lost to time.
Yes,
It's become mythological, basically.
exactly. Yeah.
Okay, and so some of this is going to be Eliza, was it?
Eliza, the young girl
Yes,
who
Eliza.
is the patron of Nella's,
Hmm.
and then the rest of it will be Caroline,
Caroline,
the
who,
present day storyteller.
right, and she's the one who like is going to connect it through history, like rediscover what happened.
Yes,
Okay.
exactly. So it's a
Hmm.
little bit fantasy, a little bit historical fiction, a little bit murder, a little bit betrayal. It's a lot.
Yeah, yeah, that sounds like that's everything that I'm kind of into, like the sort of
Yeah,
not quite 100% realistic crime fiction. Like I like crime fiction, but I like fantasy crime
me
fiction.
too. Absolutely.
I don't like I kind of enjoy procedural crime dramas, stuff like NCIS or CSI, for the scientific component of it. But I think that those things tend to be a lot more interesting when you take them away from the standard version of that genre that we're used to seeing, like CSI or NCIS are often the ones that people are going to think of, and you put them into something like this.
Absolutely. Yes, I completely agree. I was just having a conversation the other day actually with someone about how I can watch things like that, like NCIS, CSI, Criminal Minds, whatever. I can
Hmm.
watch it all day long. But when I am forced to sit down and try to read a courtroom drama, mystery, murder,
Hmm.
all of the interest to me
Hmm.
is lost. I can watch the procedures, the hearings, like all day long, but I cannot look at a page and have that scene jump out at me.
No, I get that because I think that's why, for a lot of people, John Grisham's A Time to Kill
Yep,
is a timeless classic in film, but many of the people who love the movie have never read the book. And then of course
absolutely.
there's always going to be the other side of that is that there are plenty of people who say that the book is always better than the movie. And in some cases, some film adaptations, that's true, but I think especially with procedural dramas, with crime dramas, with thrillers, it's not really 100% fair to compare one to the other because there is a different element when you make it cinematic versus when you are trying to convey that kind of suspense and tension on a
Yes, I
page.
absolutely agree. We're going to have to start a series, I think, that's just called Library Cliches Because I think this is the third time that I've said, as a librarian, we're here to tell you.
Yeah.
Um, but as librarians, we are here to tell you that the book is better than the movie is not always the truth.
That yeah, no, that is true. And sometimes it's not that the movie is better than the book. Sometimes it is simply that it's not fair to compare one to the other.
Absolutely.
Like I think I've come to a startling and unsettling realization. So brief aside, my entire life I have kind of felt that about Charlie and the Chocolate Factory.
Yes.
That you can't really it's difficult to compare the movies, and specifically when I say that I do mean the Gene Wilder film. I think that the Tim Burton version has its place, but when I think of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, of course I think of the one
Sure.
from my childhood.
Absolutely.
So that one and the original Roald Dahl novel. And I think that one of the reasons why it comes off so fantastically different on screen might be because it kind of is a procedural crime
Oh my
like,
God. Oh my God.
like,
Wait.
like there's a little suspense, there's a bit of a thriller buried in there. Because of course, there's the whole theory, and we could do a whole episode just on this, and maybe at some point we will, about how like Wonka planned all this out. He had Charlie chosen from the
Sure.
beginning. As soon as
Absolutely.
he knew who had gotten the 7 golden tickets, like he knew which child was going to win and why. As one of my friends who's a big movie buff is fond of pointing out, all of the Oompa Loompa songs, like you don't improv that.
Oh no.
Like
No,
that
certainly
had
not.
to be, that was all rehearsed, which is why, especially in the Tim Burton version, Wonka freaks out when Augustus Gloop falls in the chocolate river, because that's not what
That
was
was
planned.
actually not supposed to
Right, like
happen. Right.
somewhere in the candy room, in the edible room, is an untriggered trap that was meant for Augustus Gloop. He was supposed to go out at a different way, and so like Wonka's distress when he falls in the chocolate river is genuine.
Yes.
And it's like, what other song did the Oompa Loompas have ready? You know that, and so there he comes back to that procedural thriller kind of like trying to piece together the clues.
Have you heard the branch on this conspiracy that Grandpa Joe was involved? Because he's been in bed for how
Hmm.
long, and he just jumps up and is dancing and is like, there's some behind the scenes there of communication between him and Wonka.
Right, like
And
maybe he was in on it because he is a former Wonka
right,
employee.
exactly,
So
exactly,
Wonka knew he
yes.
could call on him. That when Charlie brought the ticket home, it was like, it was all coming together. That is that is possible. There's also quite a fascinating take that Grandpa Joe should be viewed as the antagonist of the film. He's the one who
Oh,
gets Charlie in trouble
right. I don't
and
know if
stuff
I've
like
heard
that.
this one. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's really. If you guys would be interested in just an entire series on literary conspiracy, please let us
Yes,
know. I
absolutely.
think that's something we would have a lot of fun diving into.
Absolutely. Which is a great segue for how much fun I had diving into one of the books that I have read recently, a Neil Gaiman title that I had actually not heard of,
Oh,
called The Graveyard Book.
see, I have heard of this, but I have not read it myself.
So, The Graveyard Book was a big surprise to me. I actually found it by way of our graphic novel collection, our ever growing graphic novel collection. And so I did not know until I was reading the graphic novel, and it says, like, on the front of it, adapted from the award winning novel.
Wow.
So I actually, as a Neil Gaiman fan, as someone who's read a lot of his stuff, was not familiar with this, found it quite by accident, read the graphic novel first, and it was very good. I do recommend the graphic novel. It's very compelling. I love the art style. And it is also the only novel, I have come to find out, to win both the Newbery and Carnegie medals.
Oh, wow. So that's something that I feel like in the future you could probably look out for a blog post on, because Atlanta keeps really close track of
Hmm.
what awards certain books have won. She's gone through, I know, a lot of specific awards and read all of the books that have ever won one, just so that she can expand her readers' advisory and write
Hmm.
blog posts on them. So that's super, super interesting.
Yes, because this one is loaded. It's the only one that's won both the Newbery and the Carnegie, but it's also won the Hugo Award for Best Novel, won the
Wow.
Locus Award for Young Adult Novel, and the American Bookseller Association's Best Indie Young Adult Buzz Book. It has won a Hornbook honor, and audiobook of the year.
Oh my
So
God.
even the audiobook adaptation is apparently widely celebrated. And I was like, how did I not know of this book? How did I never hear of this book? And honestly, it's that's wild to me.
For
I
sure.
can't believe that I had never heard of it before, especially because it's a very good, like it deserves all of the awards. It's very creative and it deals with this young boy whose family is murdered by a secret society
Oh, wow.
um, called the Jacks. And you've heard maybe that because Neil Gaiman is British. There's a British saying like "every man Jack of
Yeah.
them," kind of. So basically, all of those people. So the Jacks are a they sound or they are basically what they sound like Jack the Ripper, Jack Frost, a bunch of
Oh,
different Jacks that have all come together. These villains throughout history
yeah.
and they do have some supernatural powers, and there is a prophecy saying that a boy is going to destroy all of them, is going to bring them down, and every man jack of them, he'll get them all. So they think that they have found who this boy is, and they go to kill him. They get his family, but the child manages to escape and stumbles into a graveyard
Oh, man.
and the ghosts in the graveyard adopt him.
What?
Yes, they protect him from the killers and shield him so that when Jack trails in after him, like follows him, he can't find him and the ghosts make him invisible. And he grows up in the graveyard and kind of becomes like half ghost. So he has all of these powers where he can move through things, he can move unseen. People forget that they've seen him, he doesn't stick in their memories. And there are a variety of really colorful characters that he meets, including this vampire, including a werewolf, and a bunch of other supernatural creatures that all kind of take him in and either tutor him or become role models and figures of influence on him. And until, of course, at the end, he has to confront the Jacks again because they have never stopped looking for him.
Right,
They
of
know he
course.
got away. So it's dangerous for him to leave the graveyard because they are still on the lookout for him. And so the whole story is about
Wow.
him growing into a person who can confront them and what happens when the prophecy kind of circles back around.
Oh my God. So very chosen one trope, but with a lot of extra added, like usually unseen elements. Like this
Exactly.
is not something that we come across every day.
Exactly. It really grabbed me because I was like, this is the idea of the adventurer dropped on a monastery doorstep or floated down the river in a basket or whatever and
Right.
grew up to become a hero. Except this time, the people who adopted him were not, priests or monks or other heroes or great kings and queens. They were a bunch of dead people from all different time periods. Because of course
Wow.
this is in Britain, so the cemetery is full of ghosts from like the Shakespearean period,
Sure.
but also from ancient Roman colonialization, like the oldest known
Wow.
ghost that actually comes to the meetings and hangs out and talks with them,
Right.
sort of thing, is like a Roman senator or something like that in his toga and all
Wow.
that. People from all different kinds of historical periods, so he learns history and math and things from the ghosts
That's incredible.
and perhaps my favorite part of the story is that the protagonist's name is Nobody, Bod for short, because he shows up and he's too young to know his own name. He's a toddler when he
Oh,
escapes,
wow.
and they don't know his name. So they name him, they say, well, who is he? Well, he's Nobody. So it's like, well, the Nobody he shall be.
That's
So they call
incredible.
him Nobody.
Ah,
And that's really stuck with me. I was like, this is so good. And it's really an all ages book. It is written for a young adult audience. I feel like fifth and sixth graders could probably enjoy this very
sure.
easily, but also like it grabbed me and held me to the end of it.
Neil Gaiman, I feel like, is very good at that. Neil Gaiman
Yes,
writes for all ages really often. And wow, so the graphic novel version is an adaptation, right?
yes, it is. It is an adaptation. It came second, and it is in two volumes, and we do have them both.
I mean, I think that it would be incredible to read either way, but just thinking about the depictions of all of these characters.
Mm-hmm.
And I haven't even looked at the graphic novels, but it had to be incredible.
It's very, very good, and they got some excellent artists to do it.
Good.
A few of whom
Awesome.
I even recognize. So
Awesome.
I was thrilled to read through the graphic novel and then again to read through the actual original novel, which is great because that goes back to what you were talking about, where sometimes different adaptations hit you in different ways.
Sure.
So I was worried that having seen a visual of these characters and situations, that then when I went back and read a book with no pictures in it, it might land a little flat. But it's Neil Gaiman, so
So of
luckily,
course it didn't.
no, it did not. It was just like seeing, because Stardust is another of his novels that I
Right.
didn't read until after I saw the movie and went back and was a little concerned that I wouldn't enjoy it as much because I liked the film. And just like with Stardust, no, this really landed on its feet for me.
I tend to be, I think, concerned when I have read a graphic novel adaptation of a book first, or I've seen the movie adaptation and then gone back and read the novel that it was based on. I'm sometimes concerned that what will stick in my mind is the adapted version, the characters that I have seen the visual for all the way throughout reading the novel.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes that's not a good thing for me. Sometimes I want to form my own visual as I'm reading a novel. But Neil Gaiman is such a strong voice
Mm-hmm.
that I cannot imagine any adaptation of his that he has had any part in
Yeah.
not meeting up exactly with the criteria that I would have had in my head anyway.
Right. Well, and especially because when someone is a creative consultant on an adaptation of their own work, then usually what that means is that you get a pretty good idea of, okay, Neil Gaiman sat over the artist's shoulder and said, that's what that character looks like. You
Exactly.
got it. You nailed it.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but he almost always is a creative consultant, is he not?
Yes,
Okay.
exactly. So that's why I feel like the graphic novels in this case are a pretty accurate representation of what he was trying to convey because he was working with the
Right.
artist to do this. Because I know, like, my dad has the same concern where his favorite books of all time are The Lord of the Rings
Sure, exactly.
and, the eternal classic, but he put off watching the films for a very long time because he said specifically that he has a particular vision of these characters in his heads and he did not want them corrupted or polluted or changed by seeing someone
Exactly.
on screen and then worrying that now I'm going to think of that person instead. And then after finding out what a super fan, the director and then the casts, many of the people who were in the film, how many of them really loved those books and they worked so hard to try and make them as good a film adaptation as you can for
Right.
something like that. Then he finally relented and watched, and he was like, "No, you know what? They got it. They
See, that
got it."
is good to know for me personally because that actually is one of the cases, like I was just talking about, that I have felt that way about for many years. And I actually have never read The Lord of the Rings because I've seen the movies
Hmm.
and I have been afraid the entire time that I will start reading these books. And, I know that Tolkien is known maybe more largely than anything else for his descriptors. And
Hmm.
I'm so afraid that I will go into reading this timeless, legendary series and hear the molding of a character from the author's own mind and immediately think, but that's not what he looks like.
Yeah, and in this case, it is one where they really did get it. Like the people who did the props, the people who did the costumes, the makeup, the people who did the cinematography, they were all Tolkien fans, and so you really can see that. Even though definitely things were changed and
Sure,
adapted,
well, they have to
they
be.
have to be because it's film and you're doing this for a slightly different audience. But down to the fact that Gandalf's staff has a little nail in the bottom through it so that he can scratch the rune on Bilbo's door in the Hobbit movie. Like the
Wow.
actual prop that they even circulate, like that you can purchase for
Hmm.
yourself as a souvenir, has the nail through it so that he can
So
write
they
the rune on the
really
door. So
did the details justice.
yes, they really did a good job.
Good to know. Good
Yeah.
to know.
So what is your second book over here?
Okay, so my
This is the one, right?
this is the
This
one.
is the book with a backstory.
This is capital T, capital O, the one. Um, this book has quite a backstory. The second physical book that I have with me today technically is only titled S. I don't even know where to begin here.
Yeah, 'cause oh, you've shown me this book. This book is kind of a
This
lot.
book is very much a lot. The backstory of this book within my experience is I know of its existence because of Atlanta.
Mhm.
And the reason that it came about into my existence was because Atlanta placed an order request for this book for the library's catalog for our collection. And it began showing up on Atlanta's account and in our catalog, in our collection as in processing. And then it remained that way for 2 years.
Oh, wow.
And so we weren't sure what was going on with it. And it turns out that because this book is so much, there was no way for our immensely dedicated cataloging team to figure out how to circulate this item.
Oh, wow.
Um, so, so the book is titled S, and the authors of the book are Doug Dorst and J.J. Abrams. And yes, I do mean the movie producer, J.J. Abrams.
Okay.
Um, and that I think is probably a lot of how it came to be such a spectacle.
Because
So,
J.J. Abrams is good at spectacle.
because J.J. Abrams is good at spectacle. So, what you will find with this spectacle that it is a book in a box. And not a book in a box in the way that there are books categorized as book in a box by way of all of the pages exist separately within a box and you have to piece them together. And it's not one of those. Um, but the whole entity is S.
Mhm.
Within the box with the S printed on it, however, there is a novel called Ship of Theseus, written by V.M. Straka. And already we are inside this world that Doug Dorst and J.J. Abrams have created for us because Ship of Theseus by V.M. Straka is not a book. It doesn't exist. It's not real. It's something that's been created for the universe of this experience
Of S.
of S.
So this is almost like an AR game.
It really almost is like, yes, it is almost like an alternate reality game within a book rather than, I'm sure that plenty of people by now in this day and age have become pretty familiar with online ARGs or viral scary stories or things like that.
Creepypasta, that
And
kind of,
this
yeah.
exactly, this sort of has become, I mean, if you're familiar with Reddit or you're on like the No Sleep subreddit, you know that the rule is the golden rule number one of No Sleep is everything in the No Sleep subreddit is real. You don't comment on it like it's a piece of fiction. You don't experience it like a piece of fiction.
You take it at face value and interact with it as though the author or the OP is
Exactly.
completely genuine.
Yes.
Right.
So
So like the subreddit itself, like r/no sleep, kind of is a self-contained, almost kind of universe, in the same way that like you
exactly.
have universal horror monsters, and then you have like Crypt TV has their specific thing. So our no sleep has that same idea of you come into this and you engage it as
Yes.
though it's 100% on the up and up.
Wholeheartedly. I actually just last night read what I didn't even know going into it was going to be the final entry of a series on Reddit's No Sleep subreddit called How to Survive Camping. It's been ongoing, updated at least weekly, if not more often, for over 2 years. And I mean it absolutely, because when you are in a situation like that, where you are so submersed in the universe that you interact with the author as though what they are writing is real life, it feels like you are losing a piece of something that has existed with you for years. Like it was emotional. I cried about it because I was like, what do I do now? Like it's over. This person doesn't exist to me anymore. And then I had to step back and remind myself, like, she was never real to begin with.
Right, yeah, because it's those parasocial relationships. It's the same way that someone who plays Dungeons and Dragons, you get really attached to a
Yes.
character that you play, or even that someone else plays, For in the case of like now that D&D has become really mainstream in the last few years, we have like podcasts such as Critical Role or Friends at the
Right.
Table, and you get really invested in other people's characters and your own. And then when a campaign or a long series of adventures, a saga, comes to an end, and you put that character down, it's like finishing a series of books where you know that you could go back and reread it, but this is the end of the story. There is not going to be any more new adventure for this person. And
Exactly.
it can be very emotional, and you have to kind of, like you said, remind yourself, like, oh, this is fiction that I was engaging with.
Yes, and so what makes this type of fiction in particular so hard hitting, right, is the personal interaction. So I still remember when there were new series of unfortunate events books being published,
Hmm.
right? And so throughout the course of reading a series like that with someone like Lemony Snicket, who does often break down that wall, go into second person, and refer to his audience as you.
Hmm.
It makes it so much more personal. There's something about it that is so much harder to detach yourself from, which is exactly the same way as this No Sleep series that I was reading. It very much is the author interacting with the entire community of people who's reading, and very much this sense of like, yes, I've read your comments. I'm going to try this thing that you told me to do.
Hmm.
And so, where that applies to the situation that we are in with this book, Ship of Theseus, is I wish that I could show the listeners what I'm showing you right now, but in the very back of this book, there is something that looks like a library has kept track of every checkout of this book. There are stamps with checkout and check-in dates. You can go through the entire book and you'll find pieces of paper that are sometimes notes, sometimes newspaper articles, sometimes postcards, and it's all dated, and it's all to make the reader feel so submersed in this experience that it's like you are finding this book on a shelf somewhere when it wasn't meant for you.
I love
So,
that. Yep, because it literally has physical props in it that
yes,
kind of draw you in and engage you because you're finding things that other people have supposedly left in this book before the book somehow came into your possession. And you're
exactly.
getting to see how they were part of this experience and this adventure before it got to you.
Right. And so those little pieces of paper, those postcards, whatever you may have in this book throughout the
Fake
entire
photocopies,
yes, exactly.
bookmarks. I'm saying there's all kinds of stuff in here.
Um that's not even touching the surface of what the depths of this story are as far as breaking down that wall and inviting you into this universe.
Okay, so
So,
kind of like the like How to Survive Camping, or like the Slender Man series, something like that, Marble Hornets.
sure,
So
yeah.
so what is the central core concept here that you're supposed to be
So
engaging?
the central core concept is that we have this book, Ship of Theseus, which is a novel written by a man named V.M. Struck. And that novel does exist within the covers of Ship of Theseus.
So like they actually did write a
They
novel called Ship of
actually did
Theseus.
write a novel called Ship of Theseus. However, what we're really here for is the margins.
Yeah, because I'm
And
seeing as you're flipping through, the marginalia is, oh, like
yes,
there are more notes written in ink in different colors and handwritings on that one page right there than there actually is printed text for the novel itself.
100%.
This looks like my annotated version of Alice in Wonderland, where there's
Yes.
more marginalia than there is book.
So, what it is in this case is not annotations, but rather a completely separate story that takes place between two people over the course of a really long time. And so, what's going on is that the ink in the margins changes colors periodically, right? And so, you'll have a certain color of ink for one person, a certain color of ink for the other, and obviously different handwritings.
Or like one's leaving
Um,
a blue note for person B, and then person B writes back to person A in black. Or
exactly, exactly. But the colors of this ink change course several times throughout the book, and what that is depicting is the passage of time. So not only have they written to each other back and forth in the margins of this entire book, but then they have come back to this book time and time again and written separate sets of notes to each other. And so, again, admittedly, I have not gotten all the way through this. I'm honestly not very far into it at all because it takes a long time.
I see. Yeah, it looks like there's a lot of reading, and since they're expecting you to kind of piece together this puzzle as you go, that means that it looked to me like you were almost keeping some of your own
Oh, I
notes in
was.
there.
I absolutely was, and I don't think that there's a way to experience this book without doing that
Well, that
because you will.
seems kind of like the intended way to do it is
Yes.
they have you solving a mystery, and so the best way to involve you in the story they want to tell is for you to literally become part of the story in the same way that these fictional characters are already part of it.
Right, because if you don't, you will lose track of what's happening. You'll lose track of where you are. You will lose track of what these characters have determined already, what is still a mystery to everyone. And so the biggest point that I've gathered thus far throughout reading is that these characters are trying to figure out who VM Straka actually was.
Mm-hmm.
Because we don't know that he existed. We don't know if he was a person. We don't know if the person who is claiming to have written the foreword and to have edited this novel is actually VM Straka
Maybe
himself.
was the author.
We don't know.
It
And
could be a pen
so,
name. It could have been a group of people writing it together. Okay.
exactly. So, the experience overall that you are being handed by Doug Dorst and J.J. Abrams is called S.
Mm-hmm.
But within S is Ship of Theseus, something else entirely. And you're being handed over into this world where you very much are helping the protagonists of this story solve the mystery.
Right, because the implication being even like there is another sort of that's really a kind of a fourth wall gimmick here that's going on is you have the book. So
Yes.
if you are engaging this with the assumption or with the belief that the two people who were working on this mystery trying to solve it together are real, and now you have the book, immediately that begs the question, why doesn't one of them have it? How did they lose it? Because they've obviously kept track of it for a very long time.
Right.
So where are they now,
So
and
why do we have it
why
now?
do you have the book? Yeah,
Exactly.
and I mean, if something like that landed in my lap, I would feel compelled to finish solving the mystery, or at
Of
the very
course.
least to try and return it to one of these people. In either way, you are now involved, which is actually genius because, of course, the Greek myth or the Greek philosophical question of the ship of Theseus is put as simply as possible. If you have a ship and over time you replace every single piece, every individual part of that ship, every wooden plank, every line of rope, every square foot of canvas, and so on, then once you have replaced all of the pieces and effectively you have rebuilt the boat over time with new parts, is it still the same ship
Right.
or not? And in modern times, of course, there is, I don't know how accurate this is, but there is this scientific claim, or it's a piece of data that people love to comment on, a bit of trivia that people love to repeat, that every 7 years or so, all of the atoms in your body
Yes.
cycle out and have replaced themselves. So, starting every 7 years, that means that the oldest remaining atom in your body has now kind of split and reformed and become a new atom. So every 7 years, we literally remake ourselves. We're completely new people. Are you the same person as you were 7 years ago? Can you be the same person? That's our version of it now.
Sure.
So that's really clever to call the book Ship of Theseus because it's like this entire experience is made more out of the pieces of this mystery they've handed you. So by the time you get to the end of the novel, what did you actually read? What
Exactly.
was this? Was it the same thing that you started reading? And I feel like the answer is a strong maybe.
Who knows?
Who knows?
The answer is a strong who knows.
Yeah.
That's very
Wow.
much the consensus that I've gathered anyways. Like I said, I've not finished this book and I won't likely for a very long time because
Because it
there are a
seems
lot
like
of
it's an
ways. Yes,
experience.
it
It's
very
not
much
just a book. You're not just reading through it.
very much is an experience and there are a lot of ways that people a lot of different takes on how you should read this book.
Right.
And the method
Oh,
that I
yeah.
have personally chosen is cover to cover. Every insert in this book.
Read it in the order that it comes up.
Yes. Whether that's correct or not, I don't know, and I likely never will know. But from what I have gathered and from the little bits that I have allowed myself to look into how to handle this experience as a whole without spoiling anything for myself, of course. The large consensus seems to be who knows what's happening.
Which is honestly great because that just deepens the mystery for me. That makes me want to solve it more. And it's also very exciting to know that there is an active community for this book out there, people online getting together and sharing their theories or talking about the best way to experience it if you're a first time reader. Oh, definitely do this, definitely do it that way. Don't skip ahead. I love that. I love that because that keeps it that gives it a life that is separate from the book itself, which is obviously what the authors intended. So that means
Absolutely.
that we are all, as a group, as well as individually, everyone who is participating is engaging with this precisely the way that I'm sure that they meant for it to be.
Exactly. And what is so interesting about that to me is probably everyone's engaging with it differently.
Right.
I
Which is
wouldn't
also the
read it
intention.
exactly. I don't think that you and I probably would read it the same way.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that that's what they want because that means the mystery of this entire project,
Mm-hmm.
whether the mystery of the story is ever solved or not, the mystery of the experience never will be.
Right, like one question will always remain unanswered, which is what exactly did the authors want out of this, or what did they get from this? Why did they do it the way that they did? And it's like Carly Simon. All she has to do is keep her mouth shut, and we'll wonder until the end of human civilization who is so vain.
Yep.
And we'll never know. That will be one of the great and honestly, it's kind of like that, or like you and I have even had this discussion, I think, where there is a historical question, a historiographical question of it's even kind of recent history over in Britain. There are these sets that you used to be able to get for your tableware that were five little pots, and we know what went in
Yes.
four of the pots, but nobody knows what the fifth one. And it was like salt, mustard, vinegar, oil. I think was the fourth one, and then there are all kinds of theories about what went in the fifth one, but nobody knows for sure. And part of that is because no one wrote it down because at the time it was obvious.
Yep.
And in my heart of hearts, as a librarian, as someone with museum experience, that's one of the things that we do is sometimes behind the scenes, we are called on to solve mysteries beyond just, hey, can you help me remember what this book is? I can't remember the name of it, but it was blue.
Right.
Or I remember X about the character, but I can't remember the title. Can you help me find it again? Those are the common mysteries you expect. But behind the scenes in the back office, we get into some deep dark like puzzles and trivia, and that's one of those questions that if we never know the answer to that, no one is hurt by it. So I kind of hope it never gets answered, and that way at the end of time there will still be one thing that nobody knows. Like you can never possibly have answered all the questions because
Right.
what went in that fifth pot. Likewise, Carly Simon, likewise, the ship of Theseus and S. We may never know.
We probably will never know. The only description that we get as far as intent from these authors is it is Abrams and Dorst's love letter to the written world. And
and
that's all.
and that is so moving and sweet in its own way because that really is how it comes across. Is for me what I'm taking away from this description is that this is a passion project
It has to be.
that was created by them basically just to get people to engage it. Like it is art for the sake of art. It exists solely so that people will interact with it and for no other reason.
Imagine creating something this impossible
Mm-hmm.
for any other reason than that it was your biggest passion
Yeah.
in life.
Yeah, like I just really want other people to take away whatever they're going to take from it.
Yep.
I'm going to put it out there in the world and it is what it is, and I hope that it inspires people to read and to wonder, and as long as it does, then
Then I've done my
then I've
job.
done my job. And that by itself makes it worth checking out and reading. So obviously our copy is not
We can't
really
circulate
available
this book to you, unfortunately. I
because of
wish that we could.
all the inserts, all of the props. It would be like circulating jigsaw puzzles. Eventually, it's going to come back with a piece missing, and that will ruin it for the next person because you
Exactly.
won't be able to finish it.
And I'm not sure. I think that if I remember correctly, this book retails for somewhere around $40.
Which that's, I mean, this conversation has been worth $40.
Right. So, I mean, sure, given that it is just a book, technically,
Mhm.
That's a little pricey for just a book, but absolutely worth it in my opinion. If it's something that you can afford, I highly, highly recommend
Yeah.
that everyone experience this at some time in their lives. I
Yeah,
think
because $40 is a bit pricey even for a hardback book these days, but $40 for an experience. Because that's like you would pay 25 or $30 to go for the day to an escape room with your friends.
exactly.
That's more what you're buying here. So we can't circulate it due to all of the inserts and props and 3D pieces that go with it that are absolutely part of it that are essential to this whole thing. But go down to Coffee Tree Books on Main Street and order it through them. I'm sure that they can get
I'm
it.
sure that they can.
I'm sure that they can get it, and they will. I'm sure I won't put words in their mouth, but I'm almost positive that they would love to hear about it. And if they've not read it or don't know about it, we need to tell them
We do. We certainly do.
because
Yes.
they would love it.
That is something we should put a bookmark in. I think definitely this type of book, this type of experience, is something that not a lot of people are even aware exists within the literary world, and
Yeah,
so it is something that
it's because it's rare. It's
for
rare.
sure, exactly. And once I learned that this book existed, it sort of became a passion project of mine to make more people aware of the entire genre of experimental literature, which is what this is and what it is considered. And so none of them will be exactly like this book. Unfortunately, I have found nothing else just like it. But in the near future, there will be a number of titles available within this experimental literature genre for you to come and check out from us. This is something that we would love to be able to provide you with the experience of and this type of interaction with. So I think, fingers crossed, as long as programming moves along the way
Yeah.
that we're hoping that it will, we will have not a continuous, but just like a one off program
Hmm.
of experimental literature books. And I think that I've ordered enough for our collection that we will be able to keep a display of them up.
Good. Good. I
So,
would love to have a collection of those. And
yes.
speaking of programming, as we segue into the end of our podcast for today, for those of you who are still listening at this point, since we didn't mention it at the beginning, this month's August's Chow Club, unfortunately on the 24th, has been canceled due to COVID-19 concerns. A lot of our participants are elderly. We have people of all ages, but we're trying to keep our senior patrons safe. Chow Club will resume on September the 28th instead. And we are keeping the same cookbooks. We are keeping the same theme, so you can still participate if you were already planning to be part of it. You can keep doing what you're doing. It just will be September the 28th instead of August the 24th. You can check out our website and our social media for more information about that. And of course, you can visit rowancountylibrary.org/chow-club for the skinny on all of that. And since we have talked about so many things that feed into this, I'm going to finish up with my second book that I've been reading is the most recent volume of The Adventure Zone, which is another graphic novel series.
Yes.
And it has a lot of what we've been talking about in terms of I mentioned D&D campaigns, other people's D&D campaigns. This is one of the things that made it go mainstream in a way that it hasn't really, that brought it into the social media forefront. The McElroy family, which you will look at and read and will be sure that it's pronounced McElroy until one of them calls themselves the McElroys. They have a podcast called well, they have a bunch of podcasts. In fact, we have their book called Everyone or Everybody Has a Podcast But You, and they are America's first family of podcasting. They're
Awesome.
lovely folks, and they're local too, not to Rowan County, but like they are from Huntington, West Virginia.
Oh,
So, but their probably best known podcast, other than My Brother and Me, which is the one that I think really made them famous, is The Adventure Zone, which is where their entire family, which is the three brothers, Griffin, Travis, and Justin, and their father, Clint, get together and play various tabletop role playing games. And they started with 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons, and since then they've done the Fate system, they've done a bunch of other stuff. But their first campaign has become an award-winning graphic novel series, and it's really good because it does have calls out to there's a little fourth wall breaking where Griffin was the dungeon master. He was the one running the game, and the other three were playing the adventurers. So there are references in the book to Griffin kind of peeking in around the corner of the page from this position, going like, "Are you sure you want to do that? Are you sure? Okay, here's what happens." And dealing with the curveballs that they throw him in play, but most of it takes place or is seen through the lens of the adventures in character. And much like the podcast that it is adapted from, it's a very good adaptation. The Adventure Zone starts off very silly. None of them know what they're doing. It's the first time that they've
Oh,
done this. They're really screwing it up, but they're having fun, just kind of faffing about, which is what they came to
excellent.
do.
Yes.
But then they get really into it because Griffin, as it turns out, is a good storyteller. And one of the things about their entire family that has made them so good at podcasting is they're all great at reacting and responding to one another. So
Sure.
whatever one of them's putting down, the others can pick up off of. So that's what happened with this story. Is it started out and it is just basically just they get picked up for a job for cash. Hey, I need some help getting this thing, and then things go sideways really quickly, and the story starts to get pretty deep, and they go off the beaten path and do a lot of things that you don't see in a typical Dungeons and Dragons game. I really connected with these characters. I loved hearing their story, and when I listened to the podcast, like there were a lot of points during this saga that were really emotional for me, where I was looking forward to what happened next. Or they would leave us on a cliffhanger and it'd be like, no, you can't stop there. You cannot stop there. And I am not ashamed to say that I bawled like a toddler at the end. It was really all the buildup was worth it. It all came back around. And I do not know at what point during this story that Griffin sat down and was like, okay, let's actually tell a story. Let's outline and make a plot and
Right.
have a whole thing. And we're not just screwing around from session one to session two to session three and then coming back to screw around some more. Let's have a
This is going
story.
to be real and cohesive.
Exactly,
Yeah.
because he did a really good job of going all the way back to the very first time that they played when none of them knew anything about the
Oh,
game and pulled it all forward and made it work. And I was like, did you plan
did
that?
you know you were going
Did
to
you
do
know you were
this?
gonna? When did you know you were gonna do that? Because I play a lot of Dungeons and Dragons, and as someone who does that behind the scenes part of it, it's like there are definitely times where you go, oh, that's so much better than the idea I already had. And then there's a lot of editing, or someone at the table will make an idle comment and they'll say, oh, I bet it's this, or I think this is going to happen, or what if we, and you're silently biting your tongue going, oh, that's so much better than what I had. How do I work that in? Oh, no.
How do I
Um,
make them think that was my idea?
Exactly. Or the converse, which is it's, oh no, they figured me out. Now it can't be that. I
Right.
have to change it because they're on to me. I can't let them solve the mystery before I feed them the plot twist. So now everything has to be different. And so they just did a really good job with this, and it has made a great series of graphic novels. They are in episode or volume 4 now.
Okay.
Um, and the
I was
first
just going to ask you whether they were completed, if it was
No, it
finished.
is still in process, and these are available physically. We do have them here in our young adult graphic novel collection, but they are also available on Overdrive, and we have them in our graphic content collection, as well as because people have been asking for them and reading them, they're in our What Rowan County is Reading collection as well. I do recommend them. They are, I won't call them appropriate for all ages just because some of the humor is going to be, it's not that like it's mature humor. Some of it is, but there are going to be some jokes and references and things that a really little kid is not going to get.
Right.
But a teenager is absolutely going to get it. An adult is going to have a lot of fun with it. So it's available for a wide and varied audience. And even if graphic novels are not necessarily your thing, even if tabletop role playing or games in general are not your thing, it still is a story that you can enjoy because it is still a story about adventure. It is still a story about self discovery and redemption, and it is a story about saving the world. That's something that we can all appreciate. So even
Absolutely.
if you were just a fan of generic fantasy and sci-fi, this is a good read with some good and lovable characters that has a very good balance between silly and serious, and a very great ability to bring tomfoolery around to, oh, this was actually meaningful the whole time. This one-off crack that they made in volume 1 comes back in volume 4, and it's like, oh, Oh,
This
uh-oh.
was important.
Uh-oh. Yeah, this was important the whole time. So I would recommend it to everybody, and it's got a little of everything. Volume one is just we're gonna fight some goblins, and then there are explosions. And then volume two is a murder mystery on a
Wow.
train, a runaway train that is about to crash into a city if it is
So
not
many
stopped.
variants here.
So many variants. And then I think volume three is about a Mad Max style race with
Wow.
these like tricked out death carts. And volume four, the newest one, is they go to like an orbital research station that is being taken over by this parasitic crystal that anything it touches changes into more of the
Oh
crystal.
my goodness.
And there's, of course, an overarching plot to all of it, but each of the individual adventure arcs are really well done, and there's something for everybody. There is tension, there's magic, there's everything.
So this is another thing, like the first book that you mentioned, actually, that I have heard of. It has been recommended to me, but I have never read it myself. So it for sure is something after this discussion that I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
have to immediately go check out.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would recommend it to anybody. And the podcast as well, which is on, well, I'm not going to advertise but you'll find it. It's the McElroys, it's the Adventure Zone. You'll find it
Wherever you go to get your
wherever you go to get your
podcasts.
podcasts. And speaking of advertising, I guess we've done enough of that for ourselves and for these books today. I hope that you will read at least some of these because I'm definitely going to read
I'm
yours.
definitely going to read yours. So everybody else, check them all out.
Yes, we hope that you will read all of them and let us know what you think. If you have a book that you want to review or if you have a book that you want us to review, then let us know in the comments. Hit us up on social media. Of course, this is going to be posted to YouTube, but also we'll let you know on Facebook and Twitter and so forth when it comes out as well. So check us out, follow us there, follow us on Goodreads and Instagram, and tell us about your experience with these books if you've read them, or about experiences with other books that were meaningful to you. And we will catch you next time. Again, new episodes first and third Saturday of every month. I'm Morgan.
I'm Emery.
Megan's not here. And this has been The Reading Room, the podcast brought to you by your Rowan County Public Library.